right, welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Jamaica Gale. I am the Deputy Director of the Global Innovation Forum. We are delighted to be co-hosting this conversation today with the U.S. Commerce Department's International Trade Administration. In honor of Women's History Month and International Women's Day, we will be discussing how women-owned businesses are leveraging digital resources and global markets to grow innovative, resilient businesses. So today we have a remarkable group of women with us, entrepreneurs, advocates of women's economic empowerment, and trade experts, all eager to share insights and advice for going global. So a brief overview of the format for today. So we will be hearing from 3 separate panels. The first will be a conversation with global women startups. The second, advice and resources for going global from technology providers and a global women's leadership network. And the last panel will be government resources for international growth. So to access all of the speaker bios, you can visit the event registration page, which will also be put into the chat. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Global Innovation Forum, our goal is to connect entrepreneurs and small businesses with the resources that they need to succeed in the global marketplace. We emphasize how global engagement can improve the resiliency of small businesses and the role of government in enabling entrepreneurs' global journey. So today's program is a part of the Startup Global Initiative. This is a strategic partnership between the International Trade Administration and the Global Innovation Forum. And the purpose of this initiative is to provide focused advice to small and early stage American companies that are interested in growing their businesses globally. So I want to thank our colleagues at ITA for this ongoing partnership, as well as our collaboration today. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Please note that the event is being recorded, so a link to the recording and other resources will be sent after the event. Please use the chat function if you have any questions, and please clearly indicate to which panelist your question is directed. And note that the Q&A will not be enabled during today's session, so all questions will go into the chat. The event is scheduled for an hour and a half, so the moderators will do their best to address as many questions as possible in that time. All right, so I think we are about ready to get started. So if I can ask just all the speakers for our first panel to please join me on screen. Thank you so much. So I am grateful to be joined by 3 extraordinary women business owners from across the country today. So just brief introductions. We are joined by Bessie Schwartz, the CEO and co-founder of Cloud to Street, a New York City-based platform for monitoring, mapping, and analyzing flood risk around the world for the most climate vulnerable communities. And we have Kimberly Smith, the co-founder and CEO of Marjani Beauty, a Washington, D.C.-based cosmetics e-commerce boutique for women of color. And Cecilia Flores, the co-founder and COO of Weeby Corporation, a Mountain View, California-based tech company focused on streamlining knowledge through data automation. So if we can just jump right into the conversation, I think I'd just like to ask each of you to give us a brief overview of your business, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your business, and then I think the role of global markets in your company. So I think if we can start with Bessie, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks so much for having me here today. This is an exciting group and a really wonderful panel. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cloud to Street. We're a platform for leveraging satellites, AI, and crowdsourcing community intelligence in order to track floods around the world as they're happening in near real time, and then look back in time in order to understand flood risk as it's evolving. Flooding, a little bit on why flooding. Flooding is the worst disaster. It is the majority of all losses and people affected each year, and it's about 250 million people affected every year, and this is expected to double because of climate change in the next 10 years. The problem is that the world is unprotected from a disaster management perspective and from a lack of insurance due to a missing level of disaster information. The ways we have understood disasters, primarily floods in the past, is using lots of ground equipment. It makes it slow and inaccessible to a vast majority of the world. So instead, Cloud to Street pioneered a new method, first in collaboration with Google about 10 years ago, in order to look at the Earth from above with satellites and watch floods as they're evolving. What this means is that we can now understand risk as high quality anywhere in the world as anywhere else. And insurers can now underwrite anywhere in the world remotely by replacing a field appraiser with a just picture of the flood where it's happening. We've now been in 17 countries and are working in collaboration with Munich Re and Willis Towers Watson, as well as other insurers, in order to expand the safety net to many people around the world. So we primarily work internationally and have from the very beginning of Cloud to Street's work, because climate change is global, and we're really focused on filling information gaps wherever they are.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I think next, if we can go to Kimberly.
Sure. Thanks for having me again. So Marjani is an innovative, inclusive retail space that serves as a sanctuary for Black and Brown women to find community, to network, to learn, and to shop for beauty. We're located here physically in DC, but our touch is beyond DC. Outside of the US, our biggest markets are Canada and the UK. And we have vendors from the UK, France, and Australia. So we have touch points at different touch points from the customer all the way to the consumer. And we're just we're curating a global system just around beauty. And I really love this conversation because as a small business, I'm always trying to navigate the hows and how to really keep this this system moving and being able to have our mission reach beyond just the local market, because we know that Black and Brown women, when it comes to beauty, we're often overlooked. And so I know when I started, the mission was for Black and Brown women everywhere to feel included in the beauty conversation. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation on how a small business like my own, how we do it, but how we can do it better. With help from the government and other local partners.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing and for being a part of this discussion. If we can go to Cecilia next, if you can just tell us a little bit more about your business and the role of global markets.
Sure. Thanks, Jamaica, and thanks everyone for inviting me to be here today. It's an honor. So I am a tech entrepreneur. Our company, Weeby, does IoT and AI, which is Internet of Things and Artificial Intelligence. So we committed to create technology that is easy to deploy and affordable, with the goal of democratizing the adoption of IoT. So our focus is specifically on the food industry. We are aiming to reduce the intensive amount of losses of food during production and manufacturing processes. It accounts for 40% of all food waste in the year for those inefficiencies in those two areas. So the reason why our business is global is because the food system is a global system, and organically it really grows out of any market. So you start working with a manufacturing company in one place that is actually producing in other countries. So we started seeing how important it became to have a tool set that could adapt to different, not only economic situations, but also places with scarce connectivity that could also make use of these technologies to understand better where inefficiencies happen and stop food waste from those processes. So our company is based in California. We have our operational engineering team in Argentina and then operations worldwide, basically Asia, Japan, Central America, South America, and the US. And then we manufacture also out of Taiwan. So it's a pretty global system for us as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for all of you for laying some of the groundwork for this conversation about global markets. Next, I would like to kind of explore some of the challenges that each of you has experienced just engaging in the global market. So if you could share one or two of the biggest challenges or barriers that you've experienced growing your business globally, And then beyond that, if you've experienced any challenges or barriers that have been specific to being a woman in that same space. So I think if we can go back to Bessie, if that's okay, start with you.
Yeah, certainly. Although I'm really interested to hear how kind of the different challenges we have compare, because I think we may have fairly different approaches as business. We're very much enterprise, large scale contracts. So we generally work with national governments and then with insurers who want to underwrite national governments. It's sort of like has been our primary work before. I think that our challenges have been in remote sales, which I think is probably the case with a lot of folks who are expanding into new geographies. But because we're selling primarily to like a smaller set, we're not trying to expand and have a wide distribution within a country. And so the solution for us has been channel partners that I think are really effective. So our first and primary partner was the World Bank, who then loans and supports for governments around the world who are flood affected. And through that, we were able to develop relationships, and then all remote selling where you're doing it over Zoom. So like pandemic style strategies are just sort of always what Cloud to Street did, and how to build up relationships with people and really understand if what you're doing and the problem they have is a good fit for your solution. I think it's something that we've had to get really good at, but I cannot see how we would have done it without really effective channel partners. So that's the first thing.
Wonderful. Kimberly, can we go to you next?
Sure. When I saw this question, one of the things that came to my mind right away is because I am dealing with products, and I'm just specifically very much so in the commerce. And I have a few vendors that I mentioned before that are located overseas. And one of the challenges, it comes to, duties and tariff fees. And I can really pinpoint this because I know I order the same thing. I can order the same thing from the same vendor. And I noticed this throughout 2020 specifically, where one shipment, I might have duties owed. Another shipment, duties are not owed. And a lot of it depends on the relationship that the US has with that particular country. And so it's not consistent. So it's something that is really important as a small business owner, because obviously, or any business, you want to be able to forecast fees and how much a product is going to cost. So how can I pass through any costs through to the customer on one particular item? So in January, I may have paid X in duties. In June, I didn't pay anything. And then again, in September, I did. So I think it was one of the things that I know specifically last year, we were trying to just, forecast it, but it was just so difficult. And I spoke with other small business owners that were experiencing that same challenge. So I know when it comes to like retail and products, stuff like that, that can be extremely challenging if you just can't get a hold on it, because it's pretty much out of your control. It's really based on the relationships of the different countries, and we're just kind of we're just here. And so I would definitely say that's a really big challenge for a small business.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad that you pointed that out. I know a lot of the small businesses and just entrepreneurs that we speak with on a regular basis, that is something that they bring up just time and time again. And I mean, just like for looking at like complying with foreign regulations and I guess certification and like labeling requirements as a small business, the capacity to do that is so much smaller than I guess larger corporations, and it's a huge burden on small businesses like yours. And I think that's something that, I mean, it's difficult to understand, and it takes a long time to get it and then comply. And I think that's a wonderful point to bring up. I think next, Cecilia, can we point to you?
Sure. So for us, I think two of the main challenges have been the first one, access to capital. So we initially founded the company in South America, and really, the tech industry is super capital intense, and our business is a combination of software and hardware, which scared everyone away when you mentioned hardware. So we had to find our way around it. And what we did is first we moved to the US because we knew that everything related to IoT innovation was kind of had much more speed in the US. But then we had to work around it. And the way we did it was really working with enterprises, which are our clients, but partnering with them so we could prove value and have much more of a leverage to fundraise. So, but it's been a challenge accessing to capital, and it continues to be, in a sense that we feel like we have to prove ourselves much more than maybe other players in the market. And then the second one has been really understanding what it means to go global in a sense of import and export and everything that it's involved within. So we got excited because we had a global market and our product really is addressing a global issue. And companies all over the world get excited of what we're selling. But then, you don't realize how much is involved into creating a global business or creating a global, offering your product globally until you get into the trouble of understanding what's going on in the global market or what are the markets that could be more profitable for you. So you learn as you go. And of course, sometimes you end up understanding that you don't have a business because there's so much involved to export or import. And then, I think that understanding that beforehand would be much more better for us to plan strategically in that sense. So those are being like the two main challenges that we had.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think before we, move on to a little bit more of some challenges that might have been experienced just like as a woman in this space, there is a question from the audience for Kimberly. I think anyone can actually answer this one. But do you think entrepreneurs should compare the duties and tariffs before placing orders to vendors in other countries? Or do you face this issue with the same country?
Same country. Yeah, so same country, and that's how I started to notice it, because it was the same country, same vendor, and the same products, because I'm ordering the, same category over and over again. And so that's how I started to notice that there was a difference. In 1 month, something was being held because the duties weren't paid. And then the next month I would get the products in like 2 or 3 days. And so I started to see some inconsistencies last year, more so than previous years. And so that's how I was able to kind of pinpoint it, because it wasn't from different countries. It was the same country.
Thank you so much. So I think anyone can answer this question, but have any of you experienced, just like as a woman, any barriers or challenges? I think with women that we've spoken to in the past, business owners, they've cited things like lack of access to capital, some difficulties like balancing responsibilities of home and work, so childcare, or the gender gap in unpaid housework. But have any of you experienced anything like that?
We're all like, no, not at all, never. Yeah, I'll just pick up on like the quick point, which is I think Anna already said, but the numbers I think are just really stark in terms of raising venture capital in particular. It is, I was just refreshing, yes, the numbers are just as bad as we all remembered. It's about 10% of the most recent numbers on mixed teams, and then meaning like there's at least one female founder. And then I'm on an all female founded team, which is about 2.2% of all VC money. And so I have not felt like in the venture capital conversations that I've had so far, it's hard to pinpoint, that's a no pass because of there's a gender element here, so they don't trust my plan because of it. But clearly the numbers here don't lie. So that's what I struggle with a bit, is like understanding kind of how it's playing out in those conversations that are, fundraising is, an art, not a science.
Yeah, and I think for the numbers are even lower for Black women specifically as well too. So I can echo that. From the beginning, this business has been bootstrapped, and we're in year 4 now, and so we are starting to explore other financing options. But it continues to be an uphill battle. And it's always find it so interesting because when you think about specifically, especially in beauty, where I know I can show the numbers, I can show the market, I can show the market share, I can show all of this and all the money spent. And it can be a company that can give you the receipts and show you that it's profitable, and it's still a challenge to get money versus, you know, for white males, they can have an idea, and the idea is something that investors jump on. Whereas compared to mainly women-owned businesses and Black and Brown-owned businesses, you have to be years in business and show a level of profitability that others don't have to show. And it's, it really boggles my mind on that. But we continue to find creative ways of financing and funding business and starting businesses with very little to no outside capital.
And on a positive note, I would say that for every 10 no's, then a yes comes, and it's usually a good partner that decides to back you up. And they are, you know, it's equally important to get capital as it is to get the right partners, mostly when you are in a startup or growing business, because they become part of your, you know, who you are and how you plan ahead. So for us, it's been a very, you know, bumpy road, and it's been difficult, but we are, you know, very happy that finally have the partners that we needed and the ones that are supporting us personally as entrepreneurs and also the business. So.
Absolutely. We actually, the Global Innovation Forum released a report last year called The Power of a Global Network. And it was looking at the value for women entrepreneurs in establishing a global network of peer, professional, and government advisors, and kind of helping to navigate some of those pieces, whether it be funding or finding partners in the business, like associations and that kind of thing. And I mean, you're obviously not alone in any of those barriers, especially access to capital. I think with the women that we interviewed for that report, every single one of them, that was one of the top line things that they mentioned as a huge barrier to, like, one, their confidence in their ability to go global, and two, the actual money and backing to establish that global presence. But I think I'm going to bring in a couple questions from the chat. Do you find that joining women-owned associations has helped you connect to new capital? That one can be for anyone, or I think just like networks or in general in helping.
Absolutely. In my case, absolutely. So, and it became even more important last year with the pandemic, how to leverage the existing networks and, you know, get people to connect you with the right person, and, you know, really continue to grow the organization on a digital way and continue to build meaningful relationships from far, which is hard. You know, our industry is an industry that is very handshaken. So, you know, all the networks, you know, female networks, and also, you know, for different angles. One of them is really connecting to other people and helping us get there. But the other one is also helping you personally. You know, how can you improve yourself, and how can you overcome the challenges that you have and get, you know, the better version of yourself, so you can, you know, it can take you to the next step. So for me personally, it has been the breaker.
Oh, absolutely. And we're going to hear from Vital Voices, which is a network that two of our panelists here are involved with a little bit later in the conversation. But I think another thing that we found within this report is just that as businesses are obviously the importance of networks, and the pandemic, they've had to transition to using kind of different digitally enabled ways to stay connected through the pandemic. And so I guess questions about just digital tools in general. So obviously businesses and customers alike have had to shift to digital the past year. And in many cases, digital tools have become a lifeline or a safety net for small businesses and their ability to stay connected with those networks and their customers and continue to operate safely. And I think reports have certainly found that small businesses that have been leveraging digital tools throughout the pandemic have been able to adapt much quicker and have been more resilient throughout this last year. So with that in mind, can you just describe some of the key digital tools or platforms that you rely on to find customers abroad and operate your business globally? So I think, Cecilia, if we can go to you first.
Yeah, so for me, it was a little bit interesting. I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know exactly how to move forward, I guess like the rest of the world. And so since we work a lot with other industry associations, the first reaction was to go back to them, because they are the ones that are gathering all the clients and all the people, everyone trying to understand how the future of food was, moving forward, and what was going on with the supply chain and how we could collaborate. So we started engaging much more with industry associations in a virtual way. And then at the beginning, it was a little bit complicated, but then everyone could see the value. It did challenge us to be more focused, in a sense that there's way much more noise digitally. So you have to be much more targeted in, what type of associations or what type of platform you're using. But once you get in there and you get on the right conversation, then it becomes easier. So the digital tools were enabling something that was previously happening in person, now it was happening virtually. It took us a while to get where we needed to be, but then, when we found the right spot, then we continue to grow in there. So as a digital tool, we use many. We do collaborate a lot with business partners like Microsoft. We are in the Microsoft Marketplace. They are doing digitally a lot of selling that is helping us grow the business. And we do collaborate also with through different trade shows that are now moving to virtual, that actually became much more productive, because you know exactly what you're looking for. And you invest way better your time. It's just a matter of how you can also add value so that the relationships can grow. So for us, it's been deal breaker. It's been very positive, in a sense that we could understand and reach globally other markets that otherwise, would have required us to travel somewhere or get to a trade show to meet people, that now we could do it virtually. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Kimberly, can we go to you next with the same question?
Sure. For us in the beauty space, I would say Google is our number one friend when it comes to a global reach. I've noticed that all of our international customers do find us on Google through organic searches, which is great because that's free. We're not paying for it. But also social media is another way that our international customers are finding us. So I'm not one right now. We don't pay for our digital marketing on an international basis. We only pay for the domestic audience. So everything international is strictly organic and through SEO and using all of those tools. But those tools are really helpful because we can tell that we're reaching that customer who is looking, who's a Black and brown person living abroad and is not finding what they need in their particular places, in their particular countries, but they find some options through our website. So definitely through organic traffic and boosting up, or really optimizing our website through SEO and all those different types of organic options.
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
I was just say, Kimberly, that's so impressive. Like with the way that you're expanding. I mean, so doing sales in a very different way. The particular tools we're using are not going to sound wild, like Zoom. But I would say like figuring out how to leverage virtual relationship building has been really important to us, and webinars we really leaned into that in the fall in order to just like in the face of no conferences. We really had to figure out new ways to network with people. And I think the trick for us was really, how do you have the kind of organic bumping into a person who just didn't realize that this type of solution actually was right for them, or who knew a friend of, or whatever, when you're just sitting in your home office all the time. And how do you simulate that in a webinar, which can be kind of, not that this isn't highly enjoyable, but like can be like a stiffer environment where you're not bumping into someone having coffee with them. And so we had to do a lot of strategizing around bringing people together in webinar style community building. And then how do you then leverage that into meaningful new relationships, whether or not that person's the customer or knows another customer. And so we do a lot of webinars now that we're facilitating ourselves, or we're trying to get our partners to facilitate to all of the countries that they work with, or something like that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So of course, all of you are using all these different digital tools before the pandemic, and now there's an increased reliance on them. For entrepreneurs and small businesses, that this is a new experience, and digital tools are not something that they were super comfortable using before the pandemic. Do you have any advice or best practices that you would give to women entrepreneurs for leveraging those e-commerce platforms, or kind of getting like comfortable with customers using them or the rest of their team? Kimberly, can we go to you first?
Sure. I would definitely say it might be something that makes sense to outsource in some capacity, because it can just be so daunting to do it on your own. And I tried, I tried to do it on my own. I enrolled in different courses around digital marketing and digital advertising and all of that. And it was just overwhelming. And as a very small, I have a few people on my team now, and like other small businesses, resources are stretched thin. So you have to be strategic on what you do decide to outsource. And that was the one thing that I did that I do not regret. So right now I have two different teams that work, one on SEO and the other on paid. And what I find is valuable is their knowledge on how to do all of this, like how to analyze data, how to do the different aspects of making sure the website is optimized and that we're Google friendly so that people can actually see us. And those are things that with all of my expertise that I have now, I would not have been able to really navigate that in a way that would really help my business. So I think if you can find someone, which you can find different experts, at different price points, and through networking, maybe find someone that may be looking to grow their business and might just want one client or something. But I think that would be the best thing to do, would try to find someone that has the expertise in the digital space to help you in that area. That would be my best piece of advice.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great piece of advice. And then there are a lot of different options for that kind of thing. Like you mentioned, there are a lot of like digital free resources, and that gets you to one point. And then there's a lot of, I think, just jumping off points from there. And I do know that some of like the larger technology companies do offer just kind of to go through that kind of thing with you, like as a free service. So that is, I think, something that I know like Google and Facebook and UPS do, and it's worth reaching out at some point.
They do. I will say that Google does
absolutely.
that. They have, once you set up an account, they will provide you with an account manager, and for a certain period of time, they will go into your account and help you to set up different parts of the account. So I do agree with that. So, and again, you can find free, that is the best, but utilize all the resources now. People are actually offering, free time and free resources.
No, absolutely.
I would add two things to that, which is the first one, try to plan ahead. And it might sound obvious because of course we need a plan before we go digital and try to get some outreach. But not all traction is good traction, in a sense that you might end up losing time with an audience that is not yours, or using a platform that really doesn't pay off, or it doesn't prove any return on investment. And as entrepreneurs, when we found a new business, we get excited, we're getting out there and we just want clients and tractions and followers, and it doesn't really work that way. The more you know what you're looking for, the more effective your campaign is going to be. And then the second thing would be to test a lot. Don't take anything for granted. So while you're planning and while you're kind of making your assumption and your hypothesis of what you want to achieve, start testing and see what happens, and then iterate from that testing once so you can have a solid plan, and then you can scale and invest money when the moment comes. So I would say those two things are super important, mostly at the beginning, because you always start with an idea, and then when you start testing, then kind of shapes a little bit until you get your ideal customer and your ideal target audience. So.
Absolutely. I think that's a great piece of advice. Bessie, do you have any best practices that you would like to share for just small businesses in general or women specifically in leveraging those e-commerce platforms or digital tools?
Yeah, the only thing I would say about women in particular is that I realized I was not using my own my own story and on social media particularly as much until actually Vital Voices, which was a amazing program. I was so proud and thrilled to be in that program, and I actually think the female specific support in it really helped me think about my own leadership. And it was actually through that program that they had like a social media coach who basically said that she just noticed that like women tend less to tell their story as part of the business. And we tend to just be kind of in services of the business. Like, I don't want to be for this is all about us and I'm just here to support. And actually you're losing a lot of what is compelling about your business, not just because but your story of your vision around it and why you're doing it. And I think I wasn't realizing that I was shyer about that. I thought it was strategic. I thought I was doing the right thing by taking a step back and not making it about me. And I actually think, I don't think that that's the case. And so I've been pushing myself to do it more.
I think that's an incredibly important point and something I haven't really considered before, but I think that's very, very important. I think the last question that I have for everyone, I just want to talk a little bit about the role of government in supporting women's entrepreneurship, and especially looking at support for just women's economic empowerment as a part of Congress and the administration's response to COVID and in their just economic response efforts. But women-owned businesses, as I think we've all been hearing, have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. But women can also benefit disproportionately from engaging in global markets in a positive way. So when women-owned businesses export internationally, they benefit from what's called an exporter premium. So when women export, they employ more people, they pay their employees more, they're more productive, and they earn more money than their domestic counterparts, as well as their male exporting counterparts. And you'll hear later in the conversation just some of the ways that the International Trade Administration is helping women-owned businesses go global. And then I know the SBA also has increased funding for initiatives like their STEP grants to globalize small business websites. And then trade policy, of course, plays a big role as well. But my question for each of you is, what can governments do to better help women-owned businesses engage globally and manage some of that uncertainty? So whether it be through trade policy or trade promotion programs or any other efforts. Celia, can I go to you first?
Yeah, so I have a very interesting story to tell about that. So when we first founded the company back in Argentina, we reached out to the US Embassy. They had the Chamber of Commerce with the US Embassy that had a program to help companies in Argentina that wanted to relocate to the US or connect to the US. And having access to that type of connection through the American Chamber of Commerce has been the breaker for us, because it really changed, everything. And because we were part of a larger program, we were, kind of with the support of the US Embassy back then. And it opened a door that otherwise we couldn't have opened at that moment. So it really accelerated the piece of progress for our company. So I think, beyond all the things that have to do more with the structural, access to information and access to information about trade and everything, also connections at a global level is super important, because they really accelerate when you want to go global. They really accelerate the way that you can penetrate a new market when you don't know anyone over there. So.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great point. And we'll be hearing, I think in our last panel, a little bit more specifics about programs like that. But Kimberly, can we give you the floor for a moment?
Sure, and I've been reading through some of the comments as well. And I think just the challenge that I mentioned earlier, just trying to, understand and I guess making the knowledge and the learning around export and import and just different trade rules more accessible, I would say, so that we can just understand how to navigate it. I know that, I mean, there's so much more potential and I know things that I want to do as far as creating products and then, you know, sourcing them ethically from different countries and just understanding how to connect all of these dots that I'm doing and how I'm touching different places beyond the US borders and just understanding how all of it is interconnected and how to do it on a small scale. That to me would be the most helpful. So just trying to, how do I figure it out without it seeming so, you know, so hard to do, and it seems kind of daunting, just kind of sitting here like, how do I do it?
No, it is. I think it seems incredibly intimidating for a lot of small businesses when they even think about, oh, maybe I do want to go global. Yeah. But, and again, I think we're going to hear a lot of like from people who are putting it together, those trade experts, and just where you can find some of those resources. And I think all of this is really good feedback for people also who are creating those resources. So we are almost out of time, but I think just for the last piece, Betsy, if you have any comments or input just about kind of government resources or that piece.
Yeah, I'll say one, I think, different thing just to add it to it is research funding. A lot of our European counterparts in our research community access a lot of their upfront capital and then growth capital that they're specifically putting into R&D directly from the government. And I think Europeans developed that in part because the venture capital market was bigger in the US and they were trying to sort of drive that type of innovation. But I think because of that, there have been some of the kind of European partners of ours, in some cases competitors, have been able to do some interesting things and expand that I wish we were able to do here in the US.
Thank you. I think we're about out of time for this panel right now, but thank you to all three of you for joining and sharing your global stories. I appreciate it, and I know the audience appreciates it as well. I'm going to hand the conversation over to my colleague, Jake Colvin, the Executive Director of the Global Innovation Forum, who will be moderating the next panel.
Thanks very much, Jamaica, and thank you, Bessie, Cecilia, and Kimberly for sharing your experiences. Also just wanted to echo Jamaica's thanks to the International Trade Administration for our Startup Global Partnership. I wanted to turn the conversation over to advice about how women-owned businesses can succeed globally. And just to pick up the point that Jamaica made earlier, you know, I think global markets can be especially important for women-owned businesses. Jamaica had mentioned this idea of an exporter premium, but we've also just anecdotally heard a number of stories from women entrepreneurs who have talked about the ways in which global markets, but not just markets, but peer networks and funding and media coverage have provided traction to get their business off the ground. I know a woman that we've gotten to know, Kavita Shukla from the Fresh Glow Co., talks about how early international sales and recognition helped her business take off from Columbia, Maryland. And we've heard similar stories from women from Mexico to Indonesia. I'm grateful to be joined by three advisors today who can provide insights into how women-owned businesses can succeed in the global marketplace. And so Maria Luisa Boyce is Vice President of Global Public Affairs for UPS. Sarah English is Vice President of Global Public Policy for MasterCard. And Eugenia Podesta is Senior Director for Economic Empowerment and Entrepreneurship for Vital Voices. Eugenia, you've already gotten some call outs for Vital Voices, and Maria Luisa, I know there's been a lot of talk about tariffs, and so look forward to getting into those issues. I wanted to start maybe with a general question, first for Sarah and then Maria Luisa. Sarah, what advice do you have to women-owned businesses looking to go global?
Thanks, Jake, and I'm really happy to be here. I hope you can all hear me okay. You know, it was really interesting hearing that last panel because there was something that sort of rang true throughout it, which was, and it's an obvious one, and it's access to capital. I mean, we can't go on without talking about access to capital and how important it really is. And, you know, there are challenges to it, and especially for women-owned businesses, but it's something that, you know, we at MasterCard, and I think a lot of other private sector companies can really help shepherd. The second one is around access to networks. You know, the private sector can really be the cultivator of networks and bringing in small businesses into our own networks. And it's something that we do at MasterCard. You know, whether it's introducing them to our customers that are on our network, helping them expand into new markets, mentoring, or also just creating forums where they can connect and find other partners that might help them grow their business. And then the third one I would say is around volunteers. You know, just again, for our own experience, and this is really anecdotal, but one of our programs that's called Start Path that we have all over the world, we've seen an increasing uptake in actually having MasterCard employees help with some of the mentorships and helping these small businesses, help them cultivate, get their business models in order and help them get the capital that they need to expand.
Thanks, Sarah. Maria Luisa, can we turn to you? Same question. What advice would you have given what you just heard?
So first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you. And I love the first panel. Kimberly, Bessie, and Ana Cecilia, you have my admiration. As always, I admire women entrepreneurs, and please don't lose the spirit and keep working hard. I think as I was listening to them, I will say 3 areas. From a UPS perspective, we enable women entrepreneurs, and as Sarah mentioned, we have our companies want to make a difference, and we have as a mission of our trade mission is to make certain that we continue to foster inclusive trade and be able to help entrepreneurs. And when we launched our Women Exporter program 2 years ago, Jake, and to your question, we have seen, it was very interesting listening to the panel before, because there's 3 areas that are important. One, capacity building, having the knowledge, understanding what does it mean to export, what does it mean to do business digitally, and I think our 3 entrepreneurs were mentioning that area. And we have found out, we did a survey worldwide with the International Trade Center, and our women entrepreneurs, that was one of the key challenges that came up, is having the knowledge, not to become experts, because you have to focus on your business and your product, but to have the framework so you can better ask the right questions and work with the right partners, right, of how you make it happen. The second one, and I think a little bit to what Sarah is mentioning, the importance of understanding what is that market access. And I always, in all the trainings that we have done worldwide, I tell the entrepreneurs, know your product. So know your product means not only understand what your product is, but I think Ana Cecilia was talking about it, of understanding who your audience is, right? And what are you going to talk? And when Kimberly said that, when she started to tell her story, right, that piece connects us, and of course, Bessie's passion for her products, right? Knowing your product also means, what regulations impact them, right? What is my product going to touch skin? Therefore, these agencies are going to require a license, or is my product is part of what trade agreements exist between where I want to go, and can we connect that piece? And so all of those things are very important. And so knowing your product takes a little bit of homework. But you are the best representative of your product, and then you can ask the right questions on that part. And then the third one is the knowing the resources that are available in the networking. I think Sarah was right on that piece. It's amazing. One of the things that I have learned is that when we go to chambers of commerce or associations, we sometimes don't see a lot of women entrepreneurs, members of those associations and chambers, because they don't see it as a use of their time, right? It's just more not the way of doing business, and that's sometimes how business is done. So of course, understanding that cash flow is limited, but be smart and intentional about what associations and what networks do you belong to, so that that can help you. I think so those are the 3 things in terms of of advices for the entrepreneurs. There's a lot of resources, and I will talk about that, but there's a lot of some homework to do, and know that you're not alone. There's a whole network and a family here ready to support you and helping in that piece. And even though you might have felt alone before, but please know that you're not, that there's a whole community supporting and guiding you, and a door may be closed, but a window will be open.
Thank you, Maria Luisa. And I think I want to draw you back in on the tariff conversation in the next segment, because I know that came up several times in the last panel. But Eugenia, I want to turn to you, and first wanted to thank you for Vital Voices' partnership with the Global Innovation Forum. We've appreciated the opportunity to engage you in your events, but also grateful to feature entrepreneurs from Vital Voices Network in ours and in our reporting as well. Sarah and Maria Luisa both called out the importance of having the right knowledge, but also the right networks. And I feel like that's really where Vital Voices comes in. And so given all of your work with women entrepreneurs, could you talk a little bit about the significance of networks and peer groups and advisors, and how you navigate all of that?
Absolutely. And first off, thank you so much, Jake. And likewise, it's been a tremendous pleasure working with you and in the Global Innovation Forum. And as we talk about networks and opportunities, this is exactly a prime example of that, right? Having partners that we can work with to bring visibility to the women that we work with, because that allows them to broaden their networks. I mean, one thing that we know, and across the board, I think all of us are on the same page, and globally it's well known, there's tons of research and data to back it up. Women entrepreneurs do not have the same size, diversity, or expansiveness of their networks as their male counterparts, right? And that is a significantly inhibiting factor for their growth on many different levels. And so in addition to not being able to take advantage of the opportunities that those relationships present, it really holds them back from venturing out to global growth or venturing out to really building out new opportunities, right? We know that networks are key in accessing diverse, relevant, current, innovative advice and guidance, as well as providing valuable knowledge about the mistakes and the learnings that other businesses have made. Honestly, that going back to Ana Cecilia's point, time is one of the most important currencies in all of this as well, right? And so being able to accelerate access to information and avoid unnecessary pitfalls as a result of access to certain information is huge. We know that networks help them identify significant business opportunities, access markets, partnerships, access to capital and financing, identifying employees, building out their team, business to business opportunities even. And I would even add, there's another element in this, which is we've seen time and time again that networks have also facilitated the opportunity for individual businesswomen and entrepreneurs to advance on recommendations around policy change and advocacy, which they would not have done as successfully on their own. So there's so much opportunity within the networks, and networks, as we know, is a pretty large and broad term, and it comes in very many different forms. On one end, it's your own personal individual network that you cultivate and how you cultivate the relationships that you make over time. But then it's also tapping into opportunities like Vital Voices, where I think I saw also a mention of the UPS program. There's so many programs, and those programs then bring you into larger networks that also provide other opportunities. And then back to what Sarah had mentioned as well, like the business women's associations, the chambers of commerce, there's so many levels of network that you can build. And it is really about thinking how you take ownership of building your own ecosystem. In essence, that's what it really comes down to.
Thanks, Eugenia. So I was gonna, you reminded me of one of my favorite moments in the past couple of years. I know Sasi Kimis of Earth Air. She's a fantastic social entrepreneur in Malaysia, and I know part of the Vital Voices Network. We had flown her out to Geneva to participate in an event at the World Trade Organization. And she did a great job on the event, but since she was there and she heard all about this initiative that governments were engaging in on how to make e-commerce easier for small businesses, and we took her in to see the Director General of the World Trade Organization, Roberto Acevedo at the time, and she just really laid out how important something like this is, and it's one of those things that once you develop those networks and those relationships, it becomes a lot easier to advocate and just even just to know where to go and what to say. So it was terrific to be able to be there with her. So I wanted to make sure that we focused on some of the challenges that we had heard Bessie, Cecilia, and Kimberly talk about in the last panel. So I was going to ask the three of you, could you call out one of the single biggest challenges that you see women-owned businesses face as they go global? Maria Luisa, I don't want to prejudge what you're going to talk about, but given that tariffs and customs issues came up so much, wanted to see if maybe you could in part address those. So do you think I could call on you first?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. So let's step back a little bit on that piece. The international trade and exports and imports, really all the regulations that exist in the process were built for the 20th century, which means large corporations that were exporting and importing. And for small businesses, that's a whole different game. And for women entrepreneurs, the majority of them are micro, small, and medium-sized businesses. And so trying to enter into this world of international trade and facing the cumbersome understanding of regulatory and tariffs and duties, etc., became a big hassle. And so it is one of the barriers, and I will say barriers in terms of really understanding better what do they mean, what to expect, because then you can price better your product. And if you're going to export, what we have found out is that when women, sometimes they have the idea, we have a product, they found a buyer, they're excited, and they just want to send it, right? And understanding that whole process in the pricing and the ecosystem that requires, understanding that your customer might expect to want to return it, and you send it to another country, what does that mean, right? Who pays for the return? How do you refund that information? Here in the US, there's more ability to handle the payment digitally, but Sara works on this. She's a leader in this topic globally. The fintech part is a challenge globally in other countries where there's not that understanding of how to manage that. And then comes the tariffs and the duties. That's where having that power of knowledge of trade agreements and what are the understanding between the countries, what is expected, is the commodity that you're going to sell a protected commodity in the country that you're going, therefore you're going to have to pay more. Having that understanding doesn't mean that you may lose the sale, but that you have to price better your product and have that relationship with your consumer. So definitely that's one area, Jake, that is coming more and more. The other thing that COVID did is that the pandemic has shifted in a year, 9 months, we saw it in 9 months, changes that we expected to take 5 to 10 years, meaning that now digital trade is a cross-border trade. And so that in itself brought a whole different area of opportunities and also challenges for businesses to be aware. And so part of our Women Exporter program is we do a lot of training and models on this piece. You need to have that understanding of how to better position and know if you're going to go, for example, into a marketplace and all of a sudden you get 500 customers, do you have the inventory to manage that, right? I mean, how do you, thinking through these pieces becomes very important.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Maria Luisa. So Sara, Maria Luisa mentioned some of the financial challenges. Could you talk about, just call out one of the biggest challenges that you see for small businesses?
Sure, and I'm glad you didn't ask me anything about tariffs because I'm not the expert, Maria Luisa is. But I'm going to say it again, access to capital is, it's a resource, it's an obvious resource, but it's also a real challenge. And, especially for women entrepreneurs. And if you think about it, in 1980, it wasn't until 1988 that women were actually allowed to get a business loan by themselves without a male counterpart. I mean, that wasn't that long ago. And I think you heard some of the other panelists in the last panel say how difficult it is for not only women, but Black and brown business owners to get loans. And I think there is an obsession almost with VC money. for a lot of companies. And I think there's other alternatives out there that maybe should be explored more. And what I mean by that is not only small business loans, but crowdfunding can also be a really interesting alternative way to get access to capital. Also, you know, the government has great resources, and I don't want to steal their thunder, but I saw someone put on, you know, the XM Bank as another resource. You know, so I think there's more and more for the U.S., you know, U.S. business owners to take advantage of. But you know, if you look globally, I think that gets more and more challenging. Also, you know, on the payment side, since we are a payments company, you know, getting paid and receiving funds to pay for your items is also very important. And unfortunately, the global rules are not cohesive and not interoperable sometimes. So that's why a lot of entrepreneurs face challenges in able to, if they want to accept some of the networks on their platform, their prospective customers in other countries might not be even able to do that way. So that makes it really a lot of friction in the system, unfortunately. And we're working hard to fix that, but it's just one challenge that's out there.
Thanks, Sarah. Eugenia, the same question to you. You know, what's the biggest challenge that you would call out for the entrepreneurs in your network?
So I'd like to focus in on what Kimberly brought up, right? I think the whole concept of going global is overwhelming for a lot of entrepreneurs, right? They already have a lot on their plate in the sense that they're wearing 5 million hats, right? And in addition to that, they're expected to also understand this very complex opportunity that comes with a lot of very complex rules and regulations and barriers and challenges. So, you know, to me, that information, demystifying it, making it more accessible is absolutely something that we need to prioritize, because in order to get more women into the pipelines of going global, you know, they have to understand what that means. And as we know, and we talked a little bit about this in the last panel, especially now, going global means so many different things. Sometimes it's just about e-commerce, but sometimes you're actually getting a physical product in another country. I mean, it comes in so many different shapes and forms right now that I don't think it's a one size fits all. But I do believe that focusing on education, accessible education and information is important, and understanding the right conduit for that, right? It's not necessarily that entrepreneurs are going to run to government to access that information, but who are they in contact with that can then relay this information in a way that's digestible and support them in pursuing these opportunities?
Absolutely. So we're running towards the end of time here, but I did want to ask a sort of similar question to what Jamaica asked about government policy, because one thing that Jamaica and I are thinking a lot about is how governments can help support inclusive trade and women entrepreneurs. And I think so far we've mostly come up with questions like, how can the United States and other governments recruit more women business owners as clients for their services? They tend to be underrepresented. Are there ways that trade negotiators can build on gender commitments in new initiatives? Are there ways to use international organizations like APEC or the WTO or some sort of new US-led trade initiative to link together networks of globally minded entrepreneurs and advisors and government officials, kind of globalize what we're doing here today? And so I would just appreciate your thoughts on this. You know, how can governments support the global engagement of women entrepreneurs? Eugenia, do you want to go? Well, actually, Marie-Louise, it looks like you were going to go.
Oh, I was going to go. And thank God for technology, right? I changed to my phone. So my computer had to restart. Jake, let me give you 3 specific recommendations to governments that we've been given that help directly small businesses and which include the women-owned businesses. One is, during the pandemic, we saw a lot of automation that was implemented by governments around the globe, less paperwork, more efficiency of information, and that directly has a huge impact on the small businesses. So one is for them, if they were able to do it under emergency circumstances during COVID, they have proven to be successful without hindering their compliance regulations or the revenue collection. I think that is one that can be implemented and has a direct impact on the small businesses. The second one is governments. Generally, if you think about it, before I was with UPS, I worked with U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and I was a small business ombudsman for the agency. And we don't speak small business in government. We try, and in some of the agencies where the agencies that regulate small businesses, it's hard because, again, up to my comment earlier, that a lot of the regulations are reflective of the 20th century, where there were less small business involved in trade. And so I think the second recommendation is, if you're doing trade agreements, if you're doing regulations that are going to impact import and export, and you're afraid because e-commerce is becoming, I have a friend that calls it a tsunami of boxes, right, that are coming back and forth. Think about a small business to make it easier and understandable. Sometimes they do not, they know their product because they're doing the homework, and they're going to be working with UPS, and we're going to make certain that they know that. But they need, if you make it easier and understandable what to expect on the regulations, that will make it easier for them to be compliant and move forward. And so that's the second one. And last but not least is transparency of processes. And I think we have a good, we're very good here in the US in terms of transparency of regulations, what to expect. This is more internationally, that we advocate for this in other countries, to be more transparent about their regulations and what to expect, so that small businesses can be more competitive. And I love to, of course, there are legal improvements that are needed in many countries for women entrepreneurs, where they cannot open a bank account without a male relative, or be able to own a passport, or be able to travel. And so these are business things that have an impact, that definitely can be improved.
Yeah, they're market access barriers too.
Yes.
Sarah, I wanted to turn to you. What is, how can government help?
I completely agree with what Maria said. She covered a lot of the issues. I think the only thing I would add is really, I think it's time that we have like a gender and trade chapter in our trade agreements. Sorry, I'm a trade policy geek, but and you all know this, but I feel like it's time to do that. And I think Canada was one of the first countries that actually has it in their trade agreements. What we really mean, and we care about women-owned and minority small businesses, we need to make it part of our trade agreements and ask our trading partners to have that equal access for our small businesses. So I'd like to see the Biden administration take that up as a priority for their trade agenda.
Thanks, Sarah. Eugenia, you get the last word. How can governments help? So
I would emphasize the gap, right? We know that business is basically, we look at it as involving so many different aspects of society and of the world, right? So in order to better inform everything that we do, it's important to have entrepreneurs as part of the conversation, right? Making sure that we understand what they're going through, making sure that we understand what their needs, their opportunities, and their challenges are. And really building, not to be repetitive, that true ecosystem that supports each other, right, for accessing those opportunities.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all three of you. I really appreciate you making time for us and for this event, and look forward to following up. I now get to turn it over to Tricia Van Orden with the Trade Policy Coordinating Committee of the Department of Commerce. Tricia, thank you very much for your partnership again on this event and Startup Global in general, and look forward to hearing about the next panel.
Thank you so much, Jake and Jamaica. Thank you to you for your partnership. I'm going to ask my panelists to come on video. There we go. And hi, everyone. I'm Tricia Van Orden. As Jake said, I'm with the Department of Commerce. Really delighted to kind of finalize this discussion with the last panel today. You heard a nice segue, what can government do to help? And this is the government panel. I don't think we're going to be able to touch all of those issues, but we really want to focus on the relationship between government assistance and the business owner or the entrepreneur. And we do have kind of an ecosystem approach to supporting companies that are looking to grow by going global. So Commerce is but one of many government agencies and resource partners that works directly with entrepreneurs and small businesses to help them grow. And then part of my role at Commerce is to work with federal, state, and local partners, among others, to ensure real seamless delivery of assistance that's tailored to businesses' specific needs when they need it. So I was really excited to hear the discussions from the earlier panels. I think we're going to touch on many of the same topics. We all planned our panels separately, but I think the fact that we're focusing on access to networks, access to capital, really underscores that these continue to be key challenges, and you're going to hear that from our speakers today. So I want to introduce our speakers. Colleen Fisher-Simons is one of my colleagues within the Department of Commerce. She's the Regional Director for the Pacific South region of the Commercial Services Domestic Network. Alyssa Tracy is the Director for International Trade for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And then we have Paula Murphy, who's the director of the Massachusetts Export Center, which is part of the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center network. And they each represent an ecosystem that exists in every state across the United States to support small businesses and entrepreneurs. So I'd like to start our discussion by asking each of our panelists to briefly talk about how they work with small businesses and what are the services they offer to help them go global. So Paula, I'd like to start with you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tricia, and thank you to the International Trade Administration and to the Global Innovation Forum for putting together today's terrific program with such a dynamic group of women. I'm honored to be involved. As Tricia mentioned, my name is Paula Murphy. I am director of the Massachusetts Export Center. We are part of the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center network, and I will be speaking in general terms. I'll start at least in general terms about how small business development centers, or SBDCs, if we're a government panel, so you'll hear a lot of acronyms probably. So you'll hear about how small business development centers, or SBDCs, can help early stage women-owned businesses expand internationally. Just a little bit of an overview of the SBDC program. It's a federal-state partnership between the U.S. Small Business Administration as well as state government economic development organizations. And SBDCs are hosted by a network of higher educational institutions throughout the country. There are nearly 1,000 SBDC service centers located nationwide to help small businesses across a variety of areas. So really what SBDCs do is much broader than just international business development. They provide free advisory services and technical assistance across a wide range of small business needs. So that includes everything from business planning, access to capital, marketing, business operations, and international trade is part of the spectrum of the services that they offer to businesses. And they also provide free or low-cost training services across these areas as well. So specifically within the area of international trade, the service delivery structure varies from state to state within the SBDC network. So at a minimum, all states will have international trade support available. At a minimum, you will have business advisors that are either cross-trained or may have some experience in international trade that will be available to help small businesses in that state, whereas other states may have dedicated international trade advisors that are working part of local offices alongside their regular business advisors. And then some states, such as my state of Massachusetts, will have a dedicated international trade center or even multiple international trade centers with an entire team of global trade advisors to work one-on-one with businesses. So overall, within the SBDC network, we have over 400 certified international trade counselors working nationwide, with 14 states having dedicated international trade centers. So within the area of international trade, the types of services that SBDCs offer are really one-to-one business advisory services, technical assistance services, and training across the entire export development spectrum. So for companies that are new to export and need to determine whether they're ready to export, SBDCs can offer export readiness assessments. For companies that are beginning to plan their export activities, SBDCs can help with export business planning and export marketing strategies, helping you to assess potential markets overseas, determine perhaps what channels you're going to want to use to get into those markets. A lot of SBDCs will also offer customized market research, guidance on the technical aspects of the transaction. We've heard a lot about this today, and Sbdc counselors work quite a bit with businesses on providing guidance on export financing and access to capital, global trade operations, and global trade regulatory compliance. My center, we do quite a bit of work in that area because of the kinds of companies we have located in Massachusetts, and that's a real unique need among companies in our state. And we also connect companies with other resources and partners. You're going to be hearing from an example of a state trade office and a U.S. Commercial Service office. In Massachusetts, we have a great relationship and we partner very closely with our other government resources, often cross-referring clients, sharing clients. So you will find, I think, in many states that there's a great relationship between these resources. So there's a whole network of support that's available.
Paula, thank you so much for that overview. As an export center like Paula runs for Massachusetts is a great first step because they provide a huge array of services, not only for your overall business operations, but for your global expansion. But I want to kind of turn to what states have to offer. Every state in the US has a trade agency, and I have Alyssa Tracy here from Michigan to talk a little bit about what she offers for companies looking to go global.
Unmuting myself. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you, first of all, for having me today. And for those of you who aren't aware, I work on the international trade team for the state of Michigan, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation specifically. The MEDC is an organization overall that works to promote business growth, community vitality, and overall marketing of the state through our Pure Michigan marketing campaign. The trade team in Michigan is not unlike a lot of the international trade programs in other states. So I'd encourage any of the businesses listening today to reach out to your state's economic development organization or your Department of Commerce to learn about programming and resources that they offer. As for Michigan, we have a very robust trade partner network in the state. And resources and programming ranging from trade missions and trade shows that we organize for companies in our state to participate in, to a network of foreign offices that our businesses can tap into for free to gain market research insight, develop a market entry strategy, organize virtual B2B matchmaking with potential customers or distributors, and a lot more services. Other export services that we offer, and again, they're not necessarily unique to Michigan, are free legal training on export topics, early stage export assistance for new exporters, search engine optimization reports through Sbdc that can identify gaps in a company's website when targeting international markets, as well as subsidized programs that enable companies to create international versions of their website in different languages and digital marketing programs to increase awareness of your brand globally. One of our most popular programs, though, is the STEP grant, which almost every state in the US offers. The eligible expenses for the STEP grant are set by the SBA, the Small Business Administration, but each state administers the program differently. So in Michigan, and several other states as well, we offer companies a 75% reimbursement rate, up to $15,000 a year, to help companies really encourage companies to take on more of these eligible export activities to grow their business. So we can get into more of that later in the discussion.
Thank you, Alyssa. Colleen, I'd like to turn to you next, kind of giving the federal perspective on export assistance.
Awesome. Thank you, Tricia. Nice to be part of this panel. It's awesome. I know the last panel talked about what government can do. And as you see, we have layers of services. So in addition to the Sbdc and the state, the federal government has services to help with export promotion. And we heard a little earlier about other countries' support, and they have export promotion agencies. So the United States Government Export Promotion Agency is within the Department of Commerce and within the International Trade Administration, where Tricia and I both work. I am the regional director for our operations in 3 states, but we have offices across the United States to help local businesses expand internationally. So I manage a team in Nevada, Central and Southern California, and Hawaii. My name is Colleen Simons, and I've had the privilege of also working in Maryland and Georgia, and all the states and Sbdcs can support you there. And we have what we call U.S. Export Assistance Centers, and these are known as USEACs, and they are installed across the United States. As I mentioned, there's over 100 to provide local support, to know the local programs, to feed into that ecosystem. And our Export Assistance Centers offer an array of services, just like you've heard from our other female panelists, to help export overseas. And I think the main distinction between other services and ours is we leverage a network of embassies and consulates overseas. We have colleagues overseas that are diplomats in over 100 cities in 70 countries to work for you. 80%, I think 86% of the companies that we service are small and medium-sized enterprises that really don't have the leverage of these large companies sometimes to have overseas offices. So what you can do is you can go to your local Export Assistance Center and you can ask about finding partners overseas. So one example I'll give just to illustrate how we can make these connections for you in terms of business matchmaking is we have a company in Nevada, and they make scrap metal and export it overseas. As you can imagine, the regulations, as we've heard, are always changing and they're different in every country. So they wanted to export to Indonesia, but the regulations had recently changed. So they got in touch with our Reno-based export assistance specialist. We call them trade specialists, and he was able to link them with our team in Indonesia to, one, help understand the regulations, two, get the company registered with the right Indonesian authority, and then basically was able to provide a list of a few authorized and vetted importers so that this company could make a selection, and finally help them with access to finance through another federal partner and providing export credit insurance. So really, going to your local assistance center, we can tell you about all the services we can provide, but most of them leverage this network of overseas offices that we have through the embassies and consulates that can help with business matchmaking, with vetting, helping you get paid if you haven't received your payment, things like that. So we can talk more about those services, but just know that there are quite a few of them available for you. And we are happy to kind of have you as a small business and women owned as well, punch above your weight by helping you overseas with our team to support your global expansion.
Thank you all very much for giving a brief overview. I think what's important, if you're a business, and we've heard that it can be daunting or a bit intimidating to understand all of the ins and outs of going global, I think what's most important is to connect with the network. And we exist kind of as a large ecosystem to make sure that we are delivering the right assistance, the right interventions, like when your business needs them, rather than putting you in a position of having to know all of our programs and all of our services. So speaking of networks, we've had a long discussion about this and the importance of networks and how access to networks can be a source of new ideas, of information and opportunities. And that's really a value add that all of our organizations bring. They work really closely kind of behind the scenes to orient around a business and their needs. So I want to ask each of you, how can a woman business owner or an executive leverage your organization to build her network, thereby building her business? And Paula, maybe I'll start with you again.
Great. Yeah, and I have to say one thing that I think Sbdcs are really good at is developing relationships with businesses, and we actually call them clients, with the clients that we work with. And in many ways, I think that Sbdc advisors often act in a mentor capacity with the clients that we're working with. And so in establishing those kinds of relationships, and we have long-term relationships. I've got businesses I've been working with for over 20 years. So we have long-term relationships are very common. So that does help to facilitate those kinds of connections. And we work with many partners and can plug clients into many relationships that they'll need in the global trade transaction. And so certainly starting with government resources, I mentioned before, I think we're very fortunate in Massachusetts, but I by no means is it unique to Massachusetts, but I do think we're very fortunate that we have a great relationship with our U.S. Commercial Service Office and our State Trade Office. I am literally in communication with them on a daily basis, related to clients that we're all working with. So it's not unusual for us to be cross-referring clients, depending on what's appropriate for the company, or even for all of us to be working with the same company. So we might be working with a client to help them maybe do some market research or help them with some export regulatory issues. They might be working with our commercial service office on doing a gold key to get into some export markets, and they might be working with our state trade office on a STEP grant. So it's very common for companies to be working with multiple resources, and a lot of times those connections are made by one of us, and so there's really no wrong door into our network, and we all work collaboratively, and so that's certainly one form of connection and one form of plugging businesses into resources that can help. But certainly outside of government, there are also a lot of great nonprofit resources. Again, in Massachusetts, we have a lot of nonprofit organizations that are involved in different capacities for educating companies or connecting companies or doing networking. One thing I think government organizations don't do a great job with is the networking side of things, but the nonprofit organizations really do a great job with that. And so, for example, I'm involved with the Resurrection. We have a local chapter of Women in World Trade that's resurrecting in Massachusetts, and so I've been involved with that. And they're doing a great job with networking and connecting and things like that as well. So there are a lot of nonprofit resources as well. And then finally, and I know the business panel earlier, I think it was Kimberly was talking about the need to outsource certain aspects of her global trade operations. And that's really essential as a small business. Small businesses cannot do it all themselves, and they have to rely on outside service providers to handle different aspects of things. And I think SBDCs are in a very good position to introduce companies to those kinds of resources, whether it's banks, law firms, freight forwarders, consultants, translation companies, what have you, that can help with different aspects of their global business operations. And so both through their one-on-one work with businesses as well as the training activities. So for example, each year our office, we put together an annual Export Expo. This year we held it virtually, but that's really where we bring the public and private sector resources together. And I think you'll find it looks different from state to state, but I think that you will find that in most states there will be some resources that can help connect you with both public, private, and nonprofit resources that can help.
Paula, you raise a good point that, you know, connections and resources really come from all corners. Colleen, I want to turn to you next. I know you wanted to highlight specifically district export councils, which are a really unique public-private partnership of trade experts. So can you kind of talk about that as a network and how, especially an early stage business that perhaps doesn't have expertise within the business, can leverage those to grow?
Definitely. Thanks, Tricia. So as Tricia mentioned, we have something called district export councils. They're also known as DECs. These are basically comprised of business leaders that have expertise in exporting. So there's over 60 across the country. They are really closely aligned with our agency, the U.S. Commercial Service, which is the brand of our export promotion agency. And you can see in my logo right here. DECs augment the mission of the U.S. Commercial Service by providing that private sector expertise and frankly, the network locally. So what's great about the DECs is we strive to have diversity from industry sectors and also expertise. And as Paula mentioned and Kimberly mentioned earlier, as a small company, you can't do it all. So it's really necessary early on, especially since almost every aspect of a business that touches exporting, you know, can be overwhelming because there's something to learn there, whether it's finance or shipping or compliance or legal issues. So what's great about the DECs is they often represent expertise across these sectors. So at one DEC meeting, you could come, and again, there's 60 across the country, so there should be a local one near you. And you know, as you can imagine, now they're all having virtual meetings. And you can meet the local banker and talk to them about, you know, what are the necessary steps for your small business to make sure you get paid and to vet buyers. And then next meeting, you could meet with the local attorney and just address any legal issues. And these are volunteers that volunteer a certain amount of their time to help small companies through mentoring. So initially there's not a fee, and then they can also point you to kind of low cost service providers, or there might be a member of the DEC who's available to help you. So I've often found the DEC network, I'll just give one example to close out, that was super valuable in Maryland. And that was We had a small, actually women-owned business in the chemical sector, and they had a network of distributors across the country. And she was running into all these problems with her distributors in Asia. And our DEC chair at the time, who was Bobby Patton, this was the Maryland, DC District Export Council, where I used to serve as the executive secretary. He had created an internal business criteria to kind of develop a standard for what distributors had to meet globally for his company, and also an incentive structure to make sure they were really working for your US business overseas. And he created this entire resource and just handed over a handbook to this small women-owned business, because they're down the street from each other. They want to help each other. And once you get to know the individuals there, you want them to succeed as well. So the deck was really invaluable in sharing, in really peer learning, I would say. And I think because it has a specific international slant, you find that focus sustained as, more than in other business communities, and can really help your company if you are aiming to go international. So I would highly encourage you to look up your local deck. You can go to, it's usaexporter.org and click My Deck and try to find more about your local district export council, but kind of a foolproof way to get into that international business circuit from the get-go.
Thank you both so much for that overview. Alyssa, if you have more to add to that, please do, but we are extremely short on time, and I really want you to focus on the STEP program. You mentioned that, and this is to help kind of minimize costs and address some of those undercapitalization issues that businesses face. And this is an amazing program that small businesses is really developed to get companies that are not yet going global to again, minimize the costs to get them there. And it can be used for a whole host of activities. So I was wondering, comment on networks if you have something, but otherwise maybe you can talk a little bit more about STEP and how companies can put that to use for their global expansion plans.
Sure thing. My headphones decided to go out during this, so I'm using my phone now. Technology is great. Pivoting is great. Just wanted to mention real quick on the network side, from the personal experience, I've been a member and on the board of directors for a defense industry organization in Michigan called Women in Defense that has chapters all over the country. So it's obviously a niche organization for women active in defense and aerospace, but in Michigan, and I'm sure other states, companies that are active in the defense or aerospace fields may also be tied to automotive or have other capabilities. So, getting involved, maybe not just as a member, but volunteering to be on a committee or taking a leadership role if it's available in some of these industry niche organizations can be really valuable and help grow your network in ways that you may not even anticipate. So just a plug in for that, those industry networks can be really powerful tools. In terms of the STEP grant itself, I did want to mention that this program, which is a nationwide program that each state administers, can be used for a variety of export costs. So in a normal year, many of the companies tapping into the grant dollars would use it to offset costs for attending or exhibiting at a trade show, perhaps meeting with a customer or prospective new customer overseas, or joining a state or commercial service trade mission. However, this is an abnormal year, and this past year has been abnormal, and it continues to be. So there are still plenty of non-travel uses for the STEP grant. We're supporting companies with virtual trade mission costs, developing e-commerce implementation into their website, digital marketing of their company to new markets, and website localization. So even shipping sample products to potential customers in other countries. There's a lot of uses for the STEP grant, and SBA has been fortunately fantastic to work with in being as adaptive as possible to uses of the grant that meets the company's needs today. I'm happy to answer any questions on that. I know we're running over on time.
Alyssa, I appreciate that. And I will kind of wrap it up just by asking you to very briefly, I wanted to make sure we kind of touch on the silver lining of all of us being forced to live our lives online in the past year, which is it turns out there's this huge universe, the entire globe of customers who want American products. So briefly, let's finish with like, what is the one piece of advice you have for a company to leverage the internet, leverage digital tools to build their global brand and build their global company? Colleen,
I'll just start by.
Yeah, go ahead, Alyssa.
Oh, I'll start by saying lean on your government's international trade managers, your international trade association, your international trade contacts for support. The STEP grant is here to help offset the costs and widen your impact, helping you to maybe add more dollars to those efforts than you normally would have been able to. So lean into the government resources, especially the STEP grant, which can really have a great impact on your bottom line.
Paula, can I turn to you next? Your parting advice for our digital world?
Sure. I would, maybe I'm old school. I think I'm older than the rest of the panel. I think, people, I think maybe found themselves a little flat-footed this year and they've had to pivot, and we've worked with a lot of companies that have made great use of STEP, and SBA was fabulous. They also increased the amount of money that companies were allowed to use for global digital marketing. So it's really a nice resource. But again, thinking ahead, things are going to be changing again coming up, and trade shows are going to be starting to happen again, and travel is going to be opening up again at some point in the near future. And so we're now working with companies to try to kind of integrate their new global digital marketing tools and integrate that with their strategic planning for moving ahead. So I guess that's my advice for companies right now.
Thanks, Paula. And Colleen, I leave you with the final word.
All right. Well, I would say a couple things, just 3 things mainly. 1, find your local export assistance center, go to export.gov, scroll down to local offices and find someone nearby. We can offer a service that's called website globalization. It's low cost. We review your website for international appeal and visibility. Then go get your STEP grant with Alyssa and Paula, and leverage those funds to find a website optimization so you can actually outsource it, so you don't have to do it yourself, but you can implement those recommendations. And then, just make sure you're monitoring and tracking. You do all this work on digital and you don't know who's visiting your website, which is basically your international resume, your international business card. So just make sure you keep tabs on who's coming to your site. You might have visitors there interested in your product you don't even know about. So if you optimize, just make sure you're finding out then how effective that was for you, and we're here to help.
Thank you all so much. And I apologize to everyone for going a few minutes over. Our chat box is also filled with excellent suggestions and recommendations for groups to get in touch with and other resources. So I hope everyone who has joined today realizes that there's a huge universe of women and men who really want to elevate women-owned businesses and help you be successful. So make sure to ask for help and take advantage of the resources that are out there. I can speak on the government side, are really trying hard to reach a community that may not know that these exist. And that remains a challenge for us as well, but we want to make sure that you're taking advantage of everything that's available. So with that, I want to thank the panelists so much for joining and for the insights into what the government has to offer. And Jamaica, I'm going to turn it back to you to take us home.
Thank you, Tricia. And thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining us today for this very, very important conversation and for providing such wonderful insight. We appreciate all that you do to elevate the importance of supporting women's entrepreneurship as well as economic empowerment. Thank you again to ITA for helping make this event possible. And to those in the audience, thank you so much for watching and being here with us. It's been a pleasure engaging with you all. We will gather all of the resources that were shared in today's session and send them and links to those resources in an email, as well as a link to the recording of this session. But we appreciate you all joining us and look forward to staying in touch. Thank you so much.